It all started on one of those rare sunny Saturdays when everything seemed peaceful in my quiet suburban neighborhood. The birds were chirping, the smell of fresh-cut grass filled the air, and I was finally enjoying a weekend off. No work, no errands, just me and my backyard grill. I had lived in this neighborhood for 5 years, and I thought I had seen it all, until Karen moved in across the street. She wasn't just any neighbor. She was the self-appointed enforcer of our homeowners association. The type who'd measure your grass with a ruler or send complaint letters because you're trash. Cans were visible for 30 minutes after pickup. I had managed to stay off her radar until last month, when I replaced my old weathered fence. The new one was higher, sturdier, and honestly, it looked too good. That's when Karen decided it violated HOA visual harmony standards. That morning, as I flipped burgers on the grill, I heard it, the unmistakable click of my back gate latch. I turned around, spatula in hand, and there she was, Karen, in her floral blouse, giant sunglasses, and a clipboard like she was auditing a government facility. "Good morning, Mr. Collins," she said, stepping right onto my freshly mowed lawn. "I need to inspect your fence. HOA policy requires—" "Hold on," I interrupted. "Karen, you can't just walk into my backyard. That's trespassing," she scoffed, waving her clipboard like it was a badge. "I am the HOA compliance chair. I have every right to check property lines and visual compliance." My jaw tightened. "No, you don't. You're not the police. You didn't even knock." Karen ignored me and started walking along the fence line, muttering things like, "Oh, this color doesn't match the neighborhood palette, and this post looks 2 inches too high." Then the unthinkable happened. She reached for my measuring tape that was on the workbench and started pulling it across the fence, boards, snapping it right against my fresh paint. "Karen!" I barked. "Put that down!" She turned to me with that smug little grin. "If you've got nothing to hide, you shouldn't mind me checking." That's when I pulled out my phone. Perfect. I'll just record this little inspection for the HOA and the police. Her smile vanished instantly. "You wouldn't dare," she hissed. "Oh, I absolutely would," I said, hitting record. She froze, realizing she might have crossed a serious line, but it was already too late. Because this inspection was about to turn into something much, much bigger, Karen's face went pale the moment she saw the little red recording light on my phone. "Stop filming me," she snapped, shielding her face like she was dodging paparazzi. "Not until you leave my property," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "You entered without permission." "That's trespassing, Karen," she scoffed. "It's not trespassing if I'm enforcing HOA policy." I laughed bitterly. "Then maybe you should tell the HOA president why you're inspecting fences without a warrant or permission." That's when her composure cracked. She took a step toward me, finger pointed, lips trembling with indignation. "You homeowners think you can do whatever you want. Rules exist for a reason. I just kept the camera steady. Yeah, and one of them says you stay off private property." She stood there fuming for a few seconds before turning sharply on her heel. As she stormed off, she muttered, "You'll regret this. I'll make sure the HOA fines you for every violation possible." I didn't respond. I just kept recording until the gate slammed behind her. That night, I uploaded the footage from my security cameras. Sure enough, there she was, entering my backyard without knocking, snooping around like a detective on a caffeine high. The timestamp was crystal clear. I sent the clip to the HOA board with a polite email. "For your awareness, one of your members entered my property today without consent. Please address this internally before I take further action." Within an hour, my phone buzzed. It was Dan, the HOA president. He sounded nervous. "Hey, yeah, we saw the footage." "Don't worry, we'll handle it. Please don't escalate this to law enforcement just yet." That just yet part caught my attention. "Dan," I said carefully, "she trespassed. You understand that's a legal matter, right?" He sighed. "Yeah, but if you could give us a few days to sort this out." I agreed, mostly because I wanted to see how the HOA handled their favorite enforcer when the rules finally turned against her. 3 days passed, nothing, no apology, no response. Then on the 4th night, I came home to something that made my blood boil. A bright yellow violation notice was taped to my door. "Non-compliant fencing color, unauthorized modifications, and a $500 fine." And at the bottom in bold letters, Filed by Karen H., HOA Compliance Chair. That's when I realized this wasn't over. She wasn't just breaking rules, she was declaring war. By the time I finished reading that $500 violation notice, my hands were shaking with anger. I wasn't going to let Karen bully me into paying a dime. I sat down at my desk, opened my laptop, and started collecting everything. Video footage, emails, even screenshots of her text messages in the HOA group chat. If she wanted a fight, she was about to get one the legal way. The next morning, I printed copies of everything and drove straight to the HOA office. When I walked in, the receptionist looked uneasy, like she'd been expecting me. Mr. Collins, the board meeting's not until next week. I'm not here for the meeting, I said, placing the folder on the counter. I'm here to file a formal complaint. One of your members trespassed onto my property, damaged private equipment, and now she's issuing false fines to cover herself. The receptionist's eyes widened. You mean Karen? Exactly. Within minutes, Dan, the HOA president, appeared from the back office, looking exhausted. Look, I told her to stay away. She's persistent. Persistent? I repeated. She broke into my backyard. That's not persistence, that's a crime. He sighed. We'll review your complaint officially, I promise. But I could tell from his tone that he wasn't confident. So, I decided to take it further. That night, I called my friend Ethan, a real estate attorney. I sent him the footage and the violation notice. After 10 minutes of silence, he said, Yeah, she's in serious trouble. You've got her on camera trespassing and damaging property. I'd file a police report first thing tomorrow. I nodded slowly. And the HOA fine? He chuckled. Invalid. They can't fine you for something that's not in the bylaws. She made it up. That night I drafted my plan. 1. File the police report. 2. Send copies to the HOA board. 3. Notify every homeowner about what was happening, legally. I knew if I went public, Karen's little power trip would come crashing down. The next morning, I put my plan in motion. I filed the report, handed over the footage, and watched as the officer took detailed notes. You did the right thing, he said. We'll contact her for questioning. When I got home, a few neighbors were already talking. Word spreads fast in an HOA neighborhood. By the end of the day, I had 10 messages from neighbors, all sharing their own Karen stories. Unauthorized yard inspections, threats of fines, even photos of her snooping through recycling bins. That's when I realized something huge. This wasn't just about me anymore. It was about the entire neighborhood taking back their peace. And I knew exactly how to make that happen. By the next weekend, the neighborhood had united like never before. Every lawn chair, mailbox chat, and front porch conversation was about one person, Karen. People were done being intimidated, done with the constant fines, photos, and power trips. It wasn't just me who had footage or proof, and nearly every homeowner had a story. We decided to hold a special HOA meeting. Officially, it was to discuss community concerns. But everyone knew what it was really about, Karen's reign of terror. When the meeting began, Dan, the HOA president, looked around the packed clubhouse nervously. All right, neighbors, he said, tapping his clipboard. Let's keep this civil. But before he could finish, I stood up. Dan, before we begin, I'd like to submit something for the record. I connected my phone to the projector, and the screen came alive with crystal clear footage. Karen walking into my backyard, measuring my fence and ignoring my protests. The audio echoed through the room. Karen, the recording showed me saying, You're trespassing. And then her smug voice filled the hall. I am the HOA compliance chair. I have every right. Gasps rippled through the crowd. You could see heads turning, eyes narrowing. The neighbors who once whispered in fear were now sitting taller, angrier. Karen, sitting near the front, tried to speak. That video is taken out of context, she blurted. Really? I said calmly. Because here's another clip. Next came footage from my security camera, her tugging the measuring tape, scratching the paint, muttering about fence violations. Then Mrs. Miller from down the street stood up. She did the same thing to me. Came into my yard to measure my deck railing, another neighbor added. She took pictures of my kids' playhouse and said it wasn't approved architecture. Within minutes, a dozen people were standing, all with complaints, photos, or witnesses. Karen's face turned redder by the second. Dan finally spoke up. his voice low but firm. Karen, based on the evidence and the multiple violations of HOA conduct, the board is voting for your immediate removal as compliance chair. Karen's mouth fell open.
You can't do this!
I am the HOA. No, Dan said, shaking his head. You're not. You're a member, and one who's forgotten the meaning of community. The room erupted in applause. Karen grabbed her clipboard and stormed out, muttering threats under her breath. But everyone knew it was over. 2 weeks later, the fines were dropped. The HOA sent out a public apology for misconduct by a former member. My fence stayed exactly where it was, and the neighborhood finally felt peaceful again. The best part? Every time I see Karen drive past now, she avoids eye contact completely, and I can't help but smile, knowing that for once, she learned what private property really means.